Welcome to The Witchy Walk, which was written actually by Fran Hollandrake. And neither of us have given this before, we've only seen it done. So you need to bear with us.
We might look at the notes now and then. Yeah.
The route we're going to be taking is the route that the condemned took through Kirkwall once they were found guilty up into their place of execution. And we're going to hopefully give you some information and entertain you a little bit with some of the stories.
Yeah, and I'm gonna start off by setting the scene here, because we're stood in the heart of Kirkwall, the heart of the ecclesiastical, the churchy side of Kirkwall. Next to us here is the Market Cross. So that's the centre of the old town, and people would meet here and they would buy and sell things, and they would do deals and shake hands by the cross. And just as on the riding of the Marches Day nowadays, there would be a town crier there who would make proclamations to say the news and who was, for example, sentenced for witchcraft. And next to us here we have the St. Magnus Cathedral. And it stands at the heart of the witchcraft trials as well, because the church elders were central in trying or putting suspected witches to trials. Sometimes trials were held in the cathedral itself. And Helen's going to say some more about the cathedral's role in the witchcraft trials in a minute. And outside here as well, there are two open spaces which are kind of voids now, but are important in the witchcraft trials. And one is the site of the Kirkwall Castle, which is where that car is coming out just now, in the junction between us and Castle Street. There stood the castle up until it was demolished around 1615. And after that we had the toll booth, which stood in the empty space behind that bench here. And the toll booth was a combination of town hall, Masonic hall and prison. So suspected witches could be held either in the castle or later in the toll booth or in the cathedral, but they're all very near to each other here in this triangle. Yeah, so we'll start. I'm handing over to Helen now, who'll talk a bit more about the cathedral.
I'm very sorry for those of you who are on a little tour we did this afternoon and who are going to get to hear this bit twice. Bear in mind. Just bear with us.
I can see a bit I've forgotten already. Yeah, just an overview of how many people were involved and so on. So the witchcraft trials in Orkney went on from 1594 to the 1670s, and in that period we know of 72 people who were tried for witchcraft, and for some of them we have recorded a sentence as well, whereas for others we don't know what happened to them after their trial. Yeah, so those are the people we're commemorating today.
This beautiful cathedral, founded in 1137, is unique in very many ways, and one of the ways in which it is unique to the British Isles is that it has a dungeon built into it. Like most great medieval cathedrals, the floor plan of this one is a cross. So the thin end of the cross is there, slides down like that. This is the west end, and then you have the south transept here, which jots out like an arm of the cross. And between that and the choir, built into the wall, it's a dungeon that's known as Marwick's Hole. Nobody knows who Marwick is. It's just known locally as Marwick's Hole. It's not used anymore. It's all, like some of us do keep a lift. It's all filled up with concrete and rubble, but you can still see one of the entrance ways into it when you go into the cathedral. And the shape of that dungeon would have been like this. It's It's known as a bottleneck dungeon, and in 3 dimensions it is designed that you cannot stand, sit or lie down in comfort for any period of time. And you'd have been dropped into it, and that would almost certainly have possibly broken a bone as you fell in. And when they cleared it out, I think in the first part of the 20th century, I think they took several human bones out of there. So presumably when people were hauled out of it, they left broken parts of their body in there. It was very unpleasant. And it is one of the ways in which it is unique to the British Isles. We don't expect a dungeon in a cathedral. The trials, when they took place, they were by a session of the Kirk elders. And these are very wealthy, very powerful, rich, white, old men, 15 of them. And a lot of these poor women being brought in from the outer isles would have just been terrified. The whole point of Marwick's Hole is it also probably gave people no sense of the time that was passing, and there could have been an acoustic effect with the services and the bells that would have just added to the torture. And from there they would have been taken out and taken along Victoria Street and then up to the place of execution on the hill. Now we do have a story which has a slightly happy ending, which is the story of the Westray Storm Witch. Mark, my husband, who does this story really, really well. For the second time today, Westray Storm Witch.
Yay!
Okay. So the Westray Storm Witch was a lady named Janet Forsyth, and she resided on the island of Westray, which is one of our most westerly of the outer islands here in the group. And she was known by the locals to be a little bit odd. She had prophetic dreams that would often come true, and she would have ointments and little charms to help heal farm animals and local people. And so she was sort of very well known as being a witch as such, but she was never seen as being bad or evil, and people tolerated her little quirks. But she had a young man who was courting her at the time, a man by the name of Benjamin Garrick, and she had this dream one night that Benjamin and his friends were taking their boat out to go fishing, and she dreamed that they'd be lost at sea, that they would never return, and that her heart would thus break asunder. And so in the morning she goes down to where the boat is, where they're getting ready to go out fishing, and she says, Benji, she says, please, don't go out today, don't take the boat out today. I've dreamt that if you take it out, you will be lost at sea and you'll never return. And it was a calm day, the sea was flat, there was no swell, there was hardly a cloud in the sky, hardly a breath of wind, and they sort of chuckled and said, nah, we'll be fine, the weather's fine, the boat won't founder, we'll be absolutely fine. And off they did. They went out, took the boat out fishing, and they didn't come back that evening, and they didn't return the next day, and it was presumed that the boat had been lost at sea with all hands. Now this did break Janet's heart, and she became a little bit of a recluse, a little bit eccentric. She'd be seen wandering around muttering to herself quite often. But one of the oddest things that she started to do, that people noticed, was on really rough days out in the bay, she would be seen out in her father's little rowing boat, rowing out in these huge waves and not coming to any harm. And because of this, the local people started to mutter that she must be in league with the devil, because how could she do this and not founder and drown? But again, this wasn't enough to get her officially accused of witchcraft and arrested. People still sort of tolerated this. This was up until the day on a particularly bad storm and huge crashing waves in the bay, and the local people spied a ship about to founder on the rocks and the cliffs. And they all come out, rubbing their hands, imagining all of the cargo that would wash up that they'd be able to spirit away and keep in their houses and profit from. Only to see Janet in her little boat rowing through these monstrous waves, coming to no harm, cresting these waves, coming down. She manages to get out to the ship, and the crew help her aboard. And with Janet's help, the pilot and the captain were able to bring the ship into a safe harbour, and she saved the ship and all the lives on board. Now, this didn't go down well with the locals. They weren't getting their plunder from the wreck, and it's at this point Janet is accused of being a witch, and she's arrested and brought here to Kirkwall and placed into the dungeon of Marwick's Hall, ready for her trial. Now, on the day of her trial, she's brought out of the dungeon, and the trial would have probably been held somewhere in the crossing of the South Transept. And the story we have is that Janet is staring intently into the crowd, into a particular one spot. As her sentence is declared, she suddenly cries out, "Save me, Benji, save me," and falls in a swoon. And just at that moment, a young man in a Royal Naval sailor's uniform darts forward, catches her, and kisses her gently on the forehead until he's ushered away by officials, because the public weren't allowed to come in. And there'd been a huge crowd of people, because this was entertainment of the day. You know, there wasn't TV, so this was people's entertainment to come and see these trials. And so Janet's popped back into the dungeon of Marwick's Hall, ready to spend the night there, to be taken out the following morning, to be taken up to Galahar to face her execution. When they come to fetch her in the morning, the dungeon is empty. The guards are drunk and passed out, and Janet is nowhere to be seen. And so it's assumed that she's used her magic to spirit herself away out of the dungeon. But the tale doesn't end here, because we have a continuation of the tale. And it's possible that this has been a part that's been added to later on. But we're told that there's an Orkney merchant who's travelling down into England on business, and he's in the town of Manchester, and he sees a shop as he's walking down the street, and the name of the proprietor is Garrick. And he thinks to himself, "Oh, that's quite a common Orkney name. I'll go in and see if the family here have any connections to the Northern Isles." So as he enters the shop, to his absolute surprise, he sees Janet Forsyth behind the counter. And lo and behold, out from the back arrives Benjamin Garrick, a lover thought lost at sea. And he gets the story from them. And Benjamin tells him that when he and his friends put out to sea, they get caught in a fog bank during their fishing trip, and they run into a Royal Naval ship, into which they're promptly pressed into service. And you can be pressed into service for as much as 4 years. And this is why they never come back. But Benjamin had heard that Janet had been arrested and to stand trial for witchcraft. So he deserted his ship, made his way back to Orkney. And it was he that was standing in the crowd in his uniform that leapt forward to catch Janet in her swoon. Now, he also manages to sneak into see the guards that night, ply them with alcohol, enough to get them to sleep. He's probably put a bit of herb in there to induce a bit of sleepiness in them as well. And he spirits Janet away. And they managed to escape from the islands here by getting onto the ship that Janet had saved out in Westray. With the help of the captain and the crew of that ship, it got them away, and they got down to Manchester. And it's said that even today in Manchester you can find the descendants of the Garricks, even to this very day.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was sadly a very rare example of an accusation of witchcraft that had a happy ending. Most of them didn't.
I looked up the trial records for Jonathan Forsyth in the archive, and there's no actual record of the happy ending, so it might not be true. It might have been added later in the Victorian period to suit the taste then.
The Victorians were very into embellishing their romantic legends a little bit.
Yeah.
But normally if somebody was accused of witchcraft, it was the nightmare started for them in many ways. They would be interrogated under torture. The torture took a number of forms. It was mainly sleep deprivation, which of course led to hallucinations. And they would also be searched on their bodies. The actual accusation, the thing that witches were doing wrong, was it was believed that they had entered into some sort of contract or got powers from the devil. That was the real thing, that where they were transgressing the rules of society, if you like, this pact with the devil. So men, and it was usually interrogators who were men, would be set upon to find the witch's mark.
Which is like the dark mark if you're in league with Voldemort. You have this, you have an invisible dark mark, and you can only see it when Voldemort is calling on you. It's that kind of thing. Yeah.
The witch's mark was where it was believed the devil had once touched you or scratched you or kissed you. And it would be a point where you could no longer feel any pain. So there would be somebody called a witch pricker, and he had something that looked a little bit like a fork that you eat your dinner with, only with two prongs. And he'd stick it in the accused witch to see when it didn't hurt. So the majority of the time it's going to hurt. And to do that, they did of course have to strip the woman naked. And often the devil's mark was believed to be under the hair, so they had to shave the heads as well. You can imagine that many of these poor women just broke under this sort of treatment. Once they had been found guilty, they are going to be paraded through the streets. These are things that attract huge crowds of thousands of people. They're usually tied, their hands behind their backs, they're very vulnerable. They may have injured themselves during the torture, or in Marwick's hole they will be starved, and they will be short of sleep, they will be injured, they'll be bruised. And they will usually be stripped down to their underwear and their heads shaved. So there's a lot of physical shaming about what's going on, their treatment for them. You know, people are going to turning up to see what they look like without their clothes on. It's embarrassing. It's all designed to make people break and to really treat them as if they are not fully human. I'm going to pass you back to Aggie, and she's going to tell us a bit about the most famous case.
Yeah, the first and most famous case in Orkney. We're going to go up there to the Earls and Bishops Palace outside. It's a bit of a detour from the route that the witches would have been taken up to Gallowha, but we'll go up there because that's where the story starts in Orkney.